Subscribe my channel and share it with your friends and family. Now let's start the video. Joseph, from the pit to the palace, a story of God's plan, Genesis 37-50. A dreamer's hope. Joseph was just a boy with dreams. He was 17, full of life, full of hope. He had no idea that his life was about to be shattered. Joseph was his father Jacob's favorite son, and everyone knew it. His father had given him a beautiful coat of many colors, a symbol of love, of favor. But to his brothers, that coat was a reminder of everything they hated about him. And then came the dreams. We were binding sheaves of grain, and suddenly, mine stood tall while yours bowed down. His brothers' faces turned dark. You think you'll rule over us? But Joseph couldn't help himself. The dreams kept coming. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed before me. Even his father was troubled. But deep down, Jacob knew God was speaking to his son. Joseph didn't understand the meaning of these dreams. He didn't know that before the promise came to pass, he would have to walk through pain, betrayal, and suffering. Betrayed by blood. One day, Joseph's father sent him to check on his brothers in the fields. He walked for miles, searching. Excited to see them. Happy. Innocent. But as he approached, they saw him first. And their hatred boiled over. Here comes the dreamer, one of them sneered. Let's kill him and see what becomes of his dreams. His heart pounded as they grabbed him. No. What are you doing? He cried, struggling. They ripped his coat from his back, the symbol of his father's love, and threw him into a dark, empty pit. Please. His voice echoed. Don't do this. But they sat down to eat, ignoring his cries. Then, in the distance, traitors. An idea formed. They dragged him up from the pit. Hope flickered in Joseph's heart, maybe they had changed their minds. But then he saw the silver. They were selling him. Like an object. Like an animal. For 20 pieces of silver, his own brothers gave him away. His hands were bound, and he was led away, tears streaming down his face. His home, gone. His family, gone. His dreams, shattered. And in the distance, his brothers laughed. A slave in a foreign land. Joseph arrived in Egypt, sold to Potiphar, a high-ranking officer. He was alone. A foreigner. A slave. But something incredible happened. God was with him. Even in slavery, Joseph worked with excellence. Everything he touched prospered. Potiphar took notice. He placed Joseph over his entire house, and for a moment, just a moment, Joseph thought, maybe life will get better. But then came Potiphar's wife. She wanted him. She pursued him. Lie with me, she whispered. But Joseph stood firm. How could I do such a thing? How could I sin against God? She didn't like hearing no. One day, she grabbed his cloak, demanding him to stay. Joseph ran. He refused to give in. And for that, he was falsely accused. Potiphar's anger burned. Without a trial, without a second thought, Joseph was thrown into prison. Once again, he lost everything. Forgotten in the darkness. The walls were cold. The chains were heavy. Joseph sat in the darkness of a prison cell, wondering. Why, God? Why is this happening? Hadn't he been faithful? Hadn't he done everything right? But still, God was with him. Even in prison, Joseph worked hard. He was put in charge of the other prisoners. And then, one day, 2 men came to him. Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. They both had dreams, and they needed answers. Joseph interpreted them. Cupbearer, you will be restored. Baker, you will die. 3 days later, it happened exactly as Joseph said. Remember me, Joseph pleaded with the cupbearer. Please, don't forget me. But the cupbearer forgot. And Joseph sat in that prison for 2 more years. 2 years of waiting. 2 years of silence. 2 years of wondering if God had forgotten him too. From prisoner to prince in a moment. Then, one night, Pharaoh had a dream. 7 fat cows devoured by 7 thin cows. 7 full heads of grain swallowed by 7 withered ones. No one in Egypt could interpret the dream. And finally, the cupbearer remembered Joseph. Pharaoh summoned him. From the prison to the palace in one moment. Standing before the ruler of the greatest nation, Joseph said, I cannot interpret dreams, but God can. And as he spoke, Pharaoh's face changed. Joseph revealed the truth, 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of famine. Egypt must prepare, or the land will perish. Pharaoh saw wisdom in Joseph. He saw God in him. And in an instant, Joseph was promoted to second in command over all of Egypt. From a prisoner to a prince. From forgotten to favored. From the pit to the palace. The greatest test, forgiveness. The famine struck. Nations crumbled. And among those who came for food, were Joseph's brothers. They bowed before him. Just as in his dream. They didn't recognize him, but he knew them. He could have punished them. He could have made them suffer. Instead, he wept. I am Joseph, your brother. They trembled. Terrified. But Joseph spoke words they never expected. Do not be afraid. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to save many lives. Instead of revenge, he embraced them. Instead of anger, he chose grace. Instead of punishment, he gave them life. Message for you today. Joseph's story is our story. 1. God's delays are not his denials. Joseph waited years, but God was working. Your waiting is not wasted. 2. God's presence never leaves you. Whether in slavery, prison, or power, God was with Joseph. And he is with you too. 3. Forgiveness is the key to freedom. Joseph could have held on to hate, but he chose love. And because of that, he saved a nation. No matter where you are, whether in the pit, the prison, or waiting for your breakthrough, trust that God is working behind the scenes. Drop an amen in the comments if you believe in God's timing. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this powerful message today. Final words. Joseph's life was not easy. But through it all, God was writing a greater story. And he's doing the same for you. What man meant for evil, God will turn for good.